Okay, today's daf is daf tes vav. Another aberration in
advance. I can leave it 8 o'clock.
okay, yeah. Another aberration of a daf in the first parak of Yevamos. Unlike all of the other dafim that we've been learning, which have been classic Yevamos dafim of Tzaras and Erva and just trying to figure out exactly what's going on. We do have a little bit of Yevamos on today's daf, but really it's a lighter daf. We're still holding in the middle of this discussion about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel and exactly what it's a very fundamental question, meaning Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, famous arguing throughout the history of Klal Yisrael, what exactly was going on during this machlekes? Meaning, was Beis Shammai behaving like Beis Shammai, and really you had two camps, so to speak? Or did you really have only one camp doing like Beis Hillel? And really, whenever we see Beis Shammai arguing with a Beis Hillel, it just means that Beis Shammai was doing like Beis Hillel. But in halacha, they had an argument. But in a practical sense, the psak halacha was always going to be like Beis Hillel. This is a question that we had sort of left off in the middle yesterday.
What was Rav Shimon's sheet again? The last thing he did? The cooler of Shimon.
Yeah, he was talking at the end about whether you have a situation of Nimna Misafik versus Vada. Yeah. But that's unrelated to what we're about to do.
Oh, no?
Yeah.
What did Rav Shimon say? We gotta read.
Want to go back?
He said they didn't do vadas, but they would do Suffolk or maybe
yeah?
stomach.
Okay,
There's a related question, which is, what did they do before Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? Meaning, it's as if
Different
they
question.
all forgot.
Yeah,
It's different,
100%.
which is not
Yeah,
addressed here.
not addressed at all.
It's
Yeah.
related.
This is really
Yeah.
coming off of the Losis. Go to the question about how do we handle really the idea you have two completely opposite camps acting in one place.
In general, that wrote it down because we started forgetting.
That's what he's addressing
The
more.
discussion is how it was remembered.
Yeah, it's a different discussion. It's a
But there's certain things that it's hard to see forgetting. Like, they're so, like, did people marry that way?
all right. I'm gonna have to cut this conversation short. Okay, very good. Good conversation. Thank you. Like your shirt, by the way, not style wise, but more the one you're wearing, taking in the spring. It's the right way to go.
Nice.
I'm still wearing sweaters. I have to get that mentality. Okay, so we're holding on the bottom of Yud Dalin Amid Beis. We're holding 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 lines from the bottom to Shema. Right. So if you remember, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel are arguing, and fundamentally the major concerns that each one will have is that according to Beis Shammai, these women are completely connected to the oven. They're Yevama completely. They're usher to everyone that's out in the world. They must be either Yibum or Chalitza with one of the brothers. That means if we were to be Noyeg like Beis Hillel, what will come out, according to Beis Shammai, is that if they go and marry some other man, this woman becomes what? She's a halala. Now, she's not a halala. She creates a halal. What's a halal? The halacha is a kohen is only allowed to marry someone who has good yichus. Kohen is on a higher madrega to a certain extent, at least when it comes to certain things, the way they behave. And so therefore, they're only allowed to marry certain women. Like, for instance, they're not allowed to marry a divorced woman. A kohen gadol is not allowed to marry an almana, a widow. So that same sort of lofty level that they have mandates that they can't marry someone called a halal or a halala, which means someone who is a byproduct of an illicit relationship of some type, or perhaps a rezaina, different things. Now, the point is that according to Beis Shammai, what is this woman? This woman, that Sarah, in our cases, we've always been referring to her as Dina, the other wife. So according to Beis Shammai, she needs Yibam from the brother, from Ruvain. And according to Beis Hillel, she's mutter to go out into the world. So if she goes and marries someone else right now, what is she effectively doing? She's living in sin, according to Beis Hillel. Now, the flip side is even worse. According to Beis Shammai, right, what's going to happen when Beis Hillel's Tzaras, Dina, who, according to Beis Hillel, is mutter to go marry someone else, according to Beis Shammai, she is a Yevama, which means she still has the Aveira of being the wife of a brother. She has an Erva. She is an Erva. So when she goes and remarries, let's say David thinks he's marrying a perfectly kosher Yosher woman. One second. According to Beis Hillel, however, the problem is that she's an Erva. And if she's an Erva, then it comes out that the child from that relationship is going to be a mamzer. So you have major issues here in terms of marrying in. It's one thing to marry a Sephardi or a Hasidic person or a Litvisha. Okay, we have your minig, I have my minig. Here we're talking literally about, according to one side, the other kids are mamzerim, and according to the other side, the other kids are halalim. What's up?
Why are we worried about that here and we don't address that by every other machlokes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel
It is being addressed by every machlekes Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel
throughout Shas?
It's coming up here more importantly only because of the consequences of the severity of the machlekes. The Gemara isn't bringing up every single case, but the question in our Gemara, as we'll see on Amid Beis, we brought it above yesterday, where we mentioned the Brisa where it mentioned Megarish Asishta. It didn't mention every single machlekes, obviously, but it mentioned a lot of the ones where yichus and kares is relevant. But yeah, effectively, the Gemara is addressing the question. Meaning, did Beis Shammai, if the examples we'll see later on about whether Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, today's daf, are going to have nothing to do with tzaras. Some of them are going to be doing with tumah and tara. Some are going to be doing with other things. The question really was Beis Shammai just another Rav in the shul, so to speak? But in the end of the day, when you walked outside the Beis Medrash, everyone did like Beis Hillel, or no? When Beis Shammai walked out, did he do what he's supposed to do? And again, just on a practical level, just try to imagine nowadays, you go to a Rav and he says to you, listen, when I was learning the sugya, chasha person, knows halacha, and he tells me, when I'm learning the sugya, I'm coming out over here that this is mutter. But he's like, and he says, but I'm not going to tell you it's mutter because that's not the halacha. Now, that's not a clear, I mean, that's a bigger conversation than what we're going to be able to touch on here. But that's not a clear, not clear what to do in such a situation. Meaning, if you learn up the sugya and you're a legit Talmud Chacham and you know that you know what you know, meaning you're not someone who's cluelessly running through Shas, but you're someone who really understands, no, all of us, really. I mean, you're talking about someone who has to, in order to be able to paskin Shiloh, it's not just enough to have been through Shas. You have to literally have a sensitivity towards where you have to know halacha. You can't, it's a catch 22. You can't just start pasking Shilohs because you learned the Gemara and you open up the Mishnah Berurah. You have to sort of understand context. When a posek tells you what the halacha is, if it's new or different than what everyone else is doing, that's somehow different than what we're discussing here. What we're discussing over here is that Beis Shammai understood the halacha according to him, the way it came out from learning the sugya, whatever his opinion was. The question is in the end of the day, do we say that he was noheg like that and all of his talmidim like that, or no, not like that? Now, if you'd ask me, just from my basic experience running through whatever little bit of Gemara I've seen, it always seems like Beis Shammai, it was always acting in accord with their own opinion. Now, you don't really find that this question, which we're addressing now, is a question.
But the problem is that Jews marry each other. So if it creates a mamzer, you see, it's different from others.
I understand the question.
Which one?
Because Jews marry
It's a serious one. You talk about cars. Yeah, you can talk about Chayve Misa. There are machlekes he was mentioning before about Yom Kippur, maybe. Different ones.
No, but let's say this guy now becomes a chef.
Also,
Yeah,
the
so
other thing
he
is
trade
that it
for
affects
everyone?
only
Yeah,
you,
he'd have
and
to
this
pay.
affects
That's
other
another
people,
question. Yeah, major.
Can
Yeah.
I go on a 10-second tangent?
5 seconds.
When do we see a story that Beis Shammai paskin against everyone else, and we see that other people did it?
I can't think of one off the top of my head.
But other stories, when there's not a machlekes, we see that. So maybe he didn't act in accordance because we have no stories that he did that.
Could be.
But-
I don't know.
wait,
That would require a 2,711 day knowledge of Shas that I just don't have. Yeah, it could be. I acknowledge that
How many
point.
other things affect other people?
A lot of
A
things.
lot.
No, you have.
Oh, you a lot.
Yeah, you have. I mean, a lot of it'll be marriage related, but it'll be.
Hilchos kashrus, right? Beis Shammai
Yeah,
held
the
his
Mishnah.
mother, Beis Hillel held his mother. Now this guy's a chef, so is he cooking trade for everyone?
Yeah.
I'm saying you have a lot of practical
I
applications.
understand.
Yeah. Okay. That being said, that's the discussion we're having. So now, remember, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, what I was in the middle of explaining was that each one of them hold that the children of a tzara could potentially either be a mamzer or, at worst, a chalal, according to Beis Shammai. Well, no, it's according to Beis Hillel. Beis Shammai's tzara's kids are chalalim. So we brought this opinion up yesterday. Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri had a suggestion to solve the problem. Tashma, you actually were the one who made the suggestion. Tashma, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri. Hayei chalacha zu rav chas b'Yisrael. In the end of the day, what are we doing here? Meaning, practically speaking, we can't leave this. Naaseh kedivri Beis Shammai havlad mamzer. If you do like Beis Shammai says, and just have the woman do yibum with her yevama, the yavam with the yevama, according to divrei Beis Hillel, that child is a mamzer. Naaseh kedivri Beis Hillel, and if you allow Dina to go marry whoever she wants because she's no longer connected to the yavam, then what? Havlad pogum. Pogum is the language of the Gemara to refer to as a chalal. This impeached status of this person who would now be allowed to go marry a kite. That would be according to the Beis Shammai. So he says, "Boyu v'niskin lehen letzaras." Let's fix this problem for the tzaras and really for the tzaras children. Shehu chaltzos v'lo misyavmos, that they should do chalitza. Meaning to say, across the board, and just understand what this means is what we'd be saying is we'd be mandating a chalitza according to Beis Hillel, and we'd be asering yibum according to Beis Shammai, and just force everyone to do chalitza. And by doing that, then you'll have, now it'll be just an important thing.
In this kind of case.
Exactly in this case, only in this case. Yeah, obviously in no other case we would do that. Meaning there may be scenarios in other cases where we apply this case specifically. So now, if they're cholzos v'lo misyavmos, it'll come out that according to Beis Shammai, the kids, meaning again, Beis Hillel's children, according to Beis Shammai, are no worse off by doing this, because according to Beis Hillel, what are we doing by allowing to marry someone else? They're going to become a chalal. Well, a chalal is certainly worse than being a chalutza. Again, they both can't marry a kohen. Meaning, it's not like Beis Shammai is really gaining in terms of who the child can marry. The only difference is really what we would call that kid. Meaning, are you going to call them a chalal because their mother did something they shouldn't have done, or are we going to say, well, the mother is a chalutza. The child will be allowed to marry. The daughter of a chalutza, child of a chalutza, is fine. Right, I'm saying just pointing out that someone is going to be prevented from marrying a Kohen here. The difference is it the child or is it the mother? In Beis Hillel, we gain a lot more. In Beis Hillel, we gain a lot more because now the child's not a mamzer. All the child is just a child of a chalutza, and everything is fine.
Marry a Kohen?
What's that?
A chalutza cannot marry a Kohen?
A chalutza cannot marry a
married
Kohen.
already.
Grusha v'chalutza. No, that's an almana. No. Grusha v'chalutza can't marry a regular Kohen. An almana can't marry a Kohen gadol.
It's interesting that we're so concerned. We said Beis Shammai v'Akom Beis Hillel ain't no Mishnah. We said that a couple of days ago. And yet we're so concerned.
So that's that to me, and I don't have a good answer for this, and I'm sure, Ruben Margolis, Maritz Chayes type of Mefarshim will have answers on this, but or Yosef Engel, these types of, but to me, it's just it's a sequence question. Meaning when we say, it's Beis Shammai b'Makom Beis Hillel Einay Mishnah. We understand that to mean, meaning is that because Beis Shammai never was Naheg like them, and that's sort of a consequence of saying this argument, or is that something to do with the Baskol, which we saw yesterday? That's not clear, but okay. Either way, this was Rabbi Yochanan's suggestion, which Chaim David had yesterday, which is a great suggestion, and it seems it would have solved a lot of problems. However, like hispiku ligmar as hadavar ad shenitrfa hasha, meaning what? Not clear exactly what this means. Life happened. They were hanging out in Beis Medrash. They were going to pass in the Shaila and whatever it was. Now again, the lashon of nitra for hasha is the language Gemara uses to just in general say something happened in onus. But if you just understand what the word means, sometimes you had an opportunity to chaparain, and the mazel had it that you could have done it. Nitra for hasha means basically they weren't able to implement this at the time, and the time never came around again. And said,
like teku almost?
No.
Snooze, you lose.
No, teku is we have plenty of time. It's just we don't know the answer. Here, it's a little bit different. Here, what we're saying is it might have been a great suggestion, but they got together to do it. They got all the rabbis together. We were going to make this psak to clear the air on this, and then they didn't do it. Now you have to understand. Every day, it's a live situation. People are getting married. People are getting divorced. People are dying. You got Yevamos flying around all over the place.
Well, even Chalitza is not a very common scenario.
True. And
It's fairly common when people died more. They didn't have doctors. They didn't have.
Ein
How
hachanami.
much more so, I think.
How much more so? That's
I think the best way to say.
I agree with you. I'm not whatsoever. I have no objection to what you're saying.
The rabbi of my other shul said he did 2 chalitzas in 1 week.
Really?
Yeah, so it happens.
Wow.
That's
Yeah.
pretty
Yeah,
nuts.
but
He wasn't saying that. He wasn't saying that happens every week, but he's saying it happens more than you know.
Okay.
Why are you religious?
All right. It's getting late. We're still holding at the beginning of the daf.
No, I don't know.
Guys, no. Guys, the side talk is wonderful, but I have to pull guys back sometimes. So we're in the middle of the Gemara. Yeah. Well, honestly, I'm not picking on you. I'm really speaking to everyone here. Just, when my kids, I can scream and say whatever I want to say. With my friends, I have to be very careful. What's that?
I don't know about that. I agree with you, Rabbi.
By the way, and the implication of my comment was there that I love you like my children.
I was going to say that, yes.
Okay. Not that I think of you as children. Yeah. So the part that we need is actually the second half of this. What's this question? Says Rabbi Shimon Gamliel, he doesn't like chalitza. He says, you think, Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, you have a great suggestion. You're solving the problem. All right, we weren't able to implement it, but Rabbi Shimon says, I don't care. Even if we would have had time, I argue that this is not a good suggestion. Why? Because what are you going to do? You're going to make all of the new women, all of the new tsaras, you're going to say everyone's got to do chalitza. So now what's going to become the new thing? People are going to say, well, if you're the daughter of one of these women, you're not a mamzer, right? Because we fixed it. Everyone knows that if you're the daughter of one of these tsaras, that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argued about, you're not a mamzer anymore, according to Beis Shammai's opinion of what Beis Hillel did, right? But what about the ladies who didn't do that? They got married, according to Beis Hillel, and according to Beis Shammai, those kids from that marriage was a mamzer. We can't retroactively change the status of a mamzer, meaning right now. You understand? Meaning, so what he's basically saying is by effecting this change, you're causing a tsar to those people because now they're the only ones walking around as a mamzer, even though the girl sitting right next to her, who's the daughter of the exact same scenario, wouldn't be a mamzeres because her mother benefits from this new halacha. And that's a problem, meaning it's not so much that it's a halachic problem.
That's a suggestion.
Well, no, the suggestion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was you must do it, meaning that you have to do chalitza. You cannot allow.
But in order to prevent a possible mamzer, we're saying do chalitza. When it's on the table, yibam and chalitza are an equal option, right? Now yibam is preferred, but chalitza is you could take it. So here we're saying, even though yibam is preferred, in order to prevent a possible question, we're saying going with chalitza. We're not making a new halacha.
We're not introducing a new halacha, but we are introducing a mandate that you have to do something that normally, right? According to Beis Shammai, right? According to Beis Shammai, we're taking a yibam away. According to Beis Hillel, we are mandating a chalitza when, really, according to Beis Hillel, it's like throwing a dart in the air. It's nothing. Meaning, there's no zika here.
But if you didn't do chalitza according to Beis Hillel, it would be nothing.
If you didn't do chalitza, there would be no issue, concern.
Right.
Yeah.
So doing chalitza is not changing.
No, you're right. The concern is only on the Beis Shammai side. Meaning, if you, according to Beis Hillel, you did something. Let's say chalitza, or let's say you didn't do chalitza. According to Beis Shammai, what is this woman? She's an eshazach, and that needs to be addressed. The chalitza is significantly helping more on the Beis Shammai side than on the Beis Hillel side. The issue that Rav Shimon Gamliel is bringing up, which is that although chalitza helps out that girl, that she's not considered a mamzer, but what about her friend who is a mamzer? Now, again, this taina, there's responses to this you could have, which are very good tainas, I think. I just don't have good answers for it, which is, okay, so in the first couple of years, it'll be a little tough, but down the line, won't be an issue. I mean, and isn't that by definition how decrees are made? You know, in the beginning, it's not easy. You know, in the beginning, it's not, you know, no one likes to change.
Don't decrees get made because problems exist?
No. What's going on over here is simple. The suggestion would be from here on out, in order to avoid the issue, let's do chalitza. In 50 years from now, everyone's going to be doing chalitza. Let me finish. Everyone's going to be doing chalitza, in which case now there's no concern. There's no more mamzeres. Right. The children of the older ladies who were once mamzerim will still continue to be mamzerim, but they were going to be mamzerim anyways.
Right, but the only reason this came about is because mamzerim were an issue. If the kids weren't mamzerim, this decree would have never happened.
No, but they were mamzerim no matter what. They were mamzerim because Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have a machlokes. Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel have a machlokes. What's the status of the ladies? So the kids are going to be mamzerim.
The second part of the decree only became because mamzerim were being created. If mamzerim weren't being created, we would have never had.
But how would they not be created?
According to Beis Hillel, there's no issue.
I know, but Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue.
But why are we saying that because of the after effect we shouldn't make the decree? The decree is only being made because the mamzerim are coming. I'm saying you're looking at it backwards.
No. So maybe I'm not explaining it well. So, and I do want to go back to, but the reason why we're making the decree is in order so from this point on we're not going to be creating any more mamzerim. Right. The reason why mamzerim are getting created, I want to clarify because I don't want to lose everyone here. The reason why mamzerim are getting creating is because according to Beis Hillel, you don't have to do anything. And therefore, according to Beis Shammai, this woman who is an Eishes Ach is going to have a child who's a mamzer. If you require chalitza, like you said yesterday, no more mamzerim. So Rav Shimon Gamliel says, what have you fixed? Right? What he suggests, what have you fixed? You're right. You stopped new mamzerim from getting created. But what about the old mamzerim that were created that now have to live in tandem with the new non-mamzerim? 1 second, and therefore you're creating a shalom problem. Like
you're saying you fixed part of the problem, but you
haven't fixed all of it. And not only that, not only that, those old mamzerim were going to always be mamzerim, and the fact that you made a takana doesn't fix them. Their kids are going to be mamzerim no matter what.
But I'm going to learn it differently. That what he's saying is you're now causing mamzerim in the old group, meaning the old group of Beis Shammai people. That's
probably what the intent of the Gemara is in terms of on the Beis Shammai side. Meaning on the Beis Shammai side, what we'd be basically saying is, sending me messages on the things. Aaron, true, but it's too hard for me to read and also dial. Correct. According to Beis Shammai, if Beis Shammai has the ability to paskin like himself, and Beis Hillel has the ability to paskin like himself, then according to Beis Shammai, they're not a mamzer. But now, if you force Beis Shammai to paskin like Beis Hillel, now all of a sudden you're saying that in Beis Shammai's world, who was these girls that last year we wouldn't have called them a mamzer? Well, now you're saying they're a mamzer because they were born a mamzer before the takana was put in place, and you can't make a takana to uproot mamzeres, which is the pashtus. Okay. Let's go right to it. Says the Gemara. So Rav Shimon Gamliel says that ma nasal mitzaros harishonos me'ata. Now, in order for that whole comment to make sense, it must be that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel actually acted separately. Meaning says the Gemara like this. Iyamris bishlama asu. Meaning asu means Beis Shammai held like himself and was noheg like himself, right? If that's the case, then it comes out that Hainu dekamer manasa, right? Because according to Beis Shammai would hold their mamzerim, right? And by making chalitza, Reb Shimon Gamliel has an argument that says, "What have you done? Now you've forced those older girls to become mamzerim." Eli Amris also, but if Beis Shammai never really actually paskined the shailas the way he held, rather it was only like a Torah debate in the Beis Medrash, then my manasa, the whole statement of manasa doesn't make sense. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak, and this was actually quoted earlier in the Gemara in a different context. Rav Nachman bar Yitzchak le'nitzrucha elo litzara atzma, meaning what? Really, what we're saying is you're right. La'olam, you'll say that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel were always noheg like Beis Hillel, and what we mean to say is that umanase hachi ka'amar. This is what it means. Hanach tzaras de Beis Hillel, and here Beis Hillel means Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai, right? These tzaras who went ahead and got remarried. If we're saying the halacha is now all like Beis Hillel, so that basically means that these tzaras are no longer considered Yevamos. That means they're allowed to go marry someone else. So let's work this scenario out. Reuven and Shimon are brothers. Shimon dies. Dina, the tzara, who we're now paskening, is mutter to go marry David. She goes and gets remarried. And now what we're saying is, Li Beis Shammai, heichi na'avid lahu. What are we supposed to do? According to Beis Shammai, what are we supposed to do? Because again, remember, right now, she's married to a new man. And we're paskening like Beis Hillel. It's going to come out that this woman, according to Beis Shammai, is married to a new man who needs chalitza. If you're going to pasken this shaila, that everyone needs chalitza, you haven't solved the problem, because now, for a separate reason, this woman is going to be getting a chalitza while she's married to another man. So just imagine, Dina got married to David. They're married, living a wonderful life, and all of a sudden, you're making a new mandate that all of the women who are tzaras have to get chalitza. So she's married to David, and all of a sudden, an envelope comes in the mail to the house and says, "Hey, Dina, remember your old husband Shimon who died? You need a chalitza from him. You got to come to the base." David's opening the mail, and he's like, "Who's this Shimon guy, and why are you still doing stuff with Shimon?" What's that? No clue. They didn't give that to me at the Daf Yomi introduction.
No, because we're going to switch from Beis Hillel to Beis Shammai, right?
Correct, yeah.
So are going to people who retroactively come out there?
You have to write your questions down.
Not everyone says we switch from Beis Hillel to Beis Shammai.
You need to write his answers.
That's like the seed of smoke.
Okay. So his answer is to him, he says, "What do you mean? You're going to have this girl go get married to David?" This is Rosh Gamliel's response. You want to make everyone do chalitza? Well, let's work it out sequentially. According to Beis Hillel says, Rachel, go marry whoever you want. You're free to go. She goes and marries David. 6 months later, decree comes out. Everyone's got to get a chalitza. She's like, "Oh, I need a chalitza from Shimon who died, right? Because otherwise, I got to go do chalitza with Reuven." And David's like, "Where are you going? Where are you headed?" Sneaking out. All of a sudden, well, what do you go to Bezdin for? Well, technically, I didn't tell you, but I was once married to this guy Shimon, and that's major problems. Now, again, halachically, nothing wrong with it. It's just a little bit uncomfortable. Says the Gemara, I don't understand. What's the big deal? Right? Hey, chinavid. Lichlatzu, you're going to make them do chalitza? Mim ase agavrayu. They're going to become disgusting in the eyes of their husbands. No man wants to see his wife leave the house and go do chalitza with another man just to take off the echo of an old marriage. He wants the new clean slate. I married you. We got a new life over here. And says the Gemara, no, what are we concerned? Okay, so what? So they'll get over it. Says the Gemara, no. The ways of Hashem are beautiful and pleasant, and this would not be and peaceful, and so therefore the halacha. That's Rosh Gamliel's response. What's that?
So it's better to have a suffix mamzer?
Apparently, according to Rosh Gamliel, yeah.
You may already have it. Just going forward.
Well, no. Now it's different. Now what we're saying is Rosh Gamliel's suggestion is, don't make this takana, and therefore going forward. Now again, that's only the case if you hold that Beis Shammai truly did
His own way.
Yeah, which again, the Gemara is pushed.
If this new marriage, they didn't have a kid, according to Rosh Gamliel, now you're allowing a mom to come into the world.
That is
I
correct.
understand.
Yeah. Okay. Says the Gemara Vayta. Toshma. Now again, today's daf is mostly going to be bringing rayas to attempt to prove, did Beis Shammai do like himself, or did Beis Shammai do like Beis Hillel anyways? That's really effectively each one of the cases. Toshma, I have a brisa. Domer Reb Tarfon. Now it just needs to be said at the outset, Reb Tarfon, which again we'll be discussing soon in Mirz Hashem in the Haggadah, right? Reb Tarfon, right, in Bnei Brak with Rabbi Akiva.
Right.
Oh. You want to shut that? Because that guy has a terrible voice again. I don't like the way he talks. Okay, Tashma. The Brisa says, Reb Tarfon says the following. To Avni, Mosai Tovai Tzaras Habas Liyadi. Unbelievable. What's it talking about? We're saying over here, Reb Tarfon has a daughter who's married to his brother, okay? And his brother has a tzara. Let's say Dina, same case. So instead of Reuven and Shimon, now we have Reb Tarfon and Reb Tarfon's brother. And Reb Tarfon is going to be the Yavam. Reb Tarfon's brother would be the theoretical brother who dies. Says Reb Tarfon, Ta'ivni, I have a taiva. I long for the time, Masai Tavai Tzaras Habas Liyadi, that the tzara of my daughter who's married to my brother, meaning he's effectively saying, I really want my brother to die. That's what it sounds like he's saying. Saying, I want my brother to die so that the daughter, my daughter's tzara, Dina, could fall to me in Yibum. Because that's what the halacha would be. Now, that's only true according to no. As a Yevama, it would be like Beishamai. Not according to Beishamai. According to Beishamai, daughter is an erva, but the tzara of the daughter is a tzara's erva, tzara's bita. This just makes it a very real thing. We're actually putting. Beishamai says exactly.
No good. Right.
Exactly. And it's an erva.
Erva, right? Correct.
Like you were saying, and he says ve'esoena, and I'll marry her, meaning to say that she'll be my Yevama. Now. The other Rishonim speak out over here that although the language of the Gemara implies that he's hoping to,
correct.
All he means to say is that it's like a language of speaking out. I hope a moment comes to me where I can paskin a shiloh that will allow someone to, obviously doesn't want his brother to die, but the simple reading of the Gemara is he's saying that, I want a scenario of it. So, you want me to explain that again?
No, but I mean, I understand what you're saying, but the
words he uses are absolutely, it's very strange to say.
It's the Baal Gemara wrote it, or he actually described it.
No, this is a brisa where Tarfon said the words to Avni. I have a taiva,
maybe he means that letter. I mean,
and especially the language of taiva of here, not with an I, of taiva. Here, the implication is on a very basic level. It sounds like he likes his.
Correct.
No,
he likes
her.
I know. I'm just explaining the words. The Gemara is going to be bothered by the language, but that's not what it means. What it means over here is he's longing for the opportunity to show that the halacha is like Beishamai.
How do you know that? How could you?
That's the Rishonim will speak out the Gemara. Don't be the guy who reads the Chumash and not Rashi.
This goes against the first opinion. I remember the beginning that said that it says if someone wants is not doing it for the right reason, whatever it is.
Completely separate thing, but yes, correct. Here we're talking about. Yeah, that's true. It's a good point. It's a very good observation. It's a good observation.
The literal.
Right. Meaning there, you're right. It's a good point.
This is Tarfon, right? He's the one who crouched and said Kriya Shema, and he almost
Yes, and Ovis. Yes.
He wasn't the guy underneath the bed.
Getting a brachas, right. He was the one.
Was the guy underneath the bed or no?
No.
In Chagiga?
No, that was Reb Chia. Was that Reb Chia under the bed of Rav? Does that make sense? Yeah, I think it was Reb Chia. No. His ha'ara here is a very good ha'ara. He's pointing out that if you remember, Abba Shaul's opinion earlier in the Masechta was that if a person's doing the mitzvah of Yibam for any reason other than to be Mekayim mitzvahs Yibam l'shem shemayim, karvli hiyais dover, that it's going to be like he's being with an erva. And if the whole reason why Tarfon is saying, I want to do this Yibam in order to show everyone that the halach is like Beishamai, I don't know if that's called l'shem shemayim. That sounds like he's doing it for some alternative reason. Granted, it's a holy alternative reason, but it's still not the mitzvah of Yibam. In which case, then, if that's, you're right. That's a very good point. But again, we don't pass like Abba Shaul, but pashtas. But the very good hara, Yeah, good. I didn't think about that. The Amar of Tarfon to Avni Mosai Tovei Tzaras Habas Liyadi ve'esaena. So the Gemara wants to bring from here a raya. What do you see? You see, meaning it's not just that it's an interesting comment. Reb Tarfon is trying to prove that the halacha is like Beishamai, meaning to say it must be, if he's saying that Beishamai acted like Beishamai. There would absolutely be no explanation for this line if really Beishamai was only in the Beis Medrash, right? So it says not a raya. Ema ve'asiena, meaning he didn't mean that I'll do married like Beis Hillel. That's all it means.
Start to see why he even wanted to do this.
Yeah, well, that's the Gemara's. Says the Gemara, if that's what he's doing, and all he's doing is telling us the halacha is you can go ahead and act like Beis Hillel. Well, why would we want to do that? He's not telling anyone to do anything that no one else does. Says the Gemara, but no, we saw earlier that even like this, there was an opinion of Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, who was a Tana, who said you got to do chalitza, and what he was saying is not like Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri, which again is a little bit Dachag in the Gemara, because even Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri was like Nitrifa Hasha, and Shimon Gamliel said it's not even a good idea. It's clear that wasn't the Psak Halacha. So really, he can't wait. Maybe that's what he means. I can't wait to show everyone that Rabbi Yochanan ben Nuri's suggestion is a bad idea. Maybe that would be the explanation. But either way, no raya to whether Beis Shammai did it or not. Toshma. Ma'aseh b'bito shel Rabbi Gamliel. This is we're talking now about Rabbi Gamliel and his daughter. Shehoisen nesuah la'aba achiv. So first of all, I just find it very interesting that you see that Yibum was happening mamish in the times of the Tanoim. Which again is just a historical fact, but there was a point in time where clearly,
Polygamy, all those things.
Yeah, I mean here you're talking about tzaras, bita, you're talking about multiple wives. Now again, it obviously makes sense. Chayim de Gershom for us is much later, but even so. So mamish the case that we've been discussing, just swap out Reuven and Shimon for Rabbi Gamliel and his brother Abba. His brother's name was Abba, and his brother Abba died without children, and now his daughter's tzara, right? V'yibin Rabbi Gamliel tzarasa. He was miyab netzara. Now, how could he possibly be miyab netzara? That only fits if you hold like Beis Shammai. If you hold like Beis Hillel, what's the tzara? She's a tzara, right? Litzra taught us that she's also an erva, like our first Mishnah. Beis Shammai is the one who says the tzara is okay. How is Rabbi Gamliel allowed to? And we know Rabbi Gamliel, by the way, was obviously not a Talmud of Beis Shammai. For the Gemara, V'tizbra, that this raya is a raya. Rabbi Gamliel Talmid Beis Shammai. We know Rabbi Gamliel is the Talmud of Hillel. He comes from that same line of Hillel, Shimon Gamliel, Reb Shimon, Rabbi Gamliel. They all come from that same Rabbi Gamliel Agadol. That whole entire line is a Hillel line, meaning not only as a Talmud but actually as family to a certain extent. It comes from the same line. Clearly, he's not a Talmud of Beis Shammai. So the fact that he was going and marrying the tzara must be not because he held the Beis Shammai, and there's no raya from here that to the Beis Shammai discussion, but rather it must be a different reason. Ela sha'ani bita shel Rabbi Gamliel the islandess havi. We're saying that really Rabbi Gamliel married Tzaras Bitoi because what was his daughter? His daughter was an islandess. If you remember on Daf Yud Beis, when we learned the sugya of islandess, the halakha of islandess, we came out that an islandess, the tzara we hold, is mutter. She's shemedes liyavam. There's the zika there. And we said the Torah has a pasuk that tells us that it's asher teled prat la'islandess. So therefore, the Tzara's islandess is mutter. So Rabbi Gamliel, as the Brisa, married his daughter's tzara, even though normally she'd be nerva because he holds like Hillel, Beis Hillel. Why? Because she was an islandess, and we know an islandess, the tzara of an islandess has a din yibum. Says the Gemara, Hamich tekatani seifa acherim oimrim bita shel Rabbi Gamliel islandess isa michlal tanakama savar lav islandess isa. Meaning, we bring an arguer, we bring acherim, Reb Meir's Rebbe, according to many people, right? We bring his opinion that what happened over here is that really the reason why Rabbi Gamliel did what he did was because the tzara was a tzara of an islandess. Well, that sounds like the Tanakama is saying it for a different reason, meaning maybe it's because he holds like Beis Shammai, and you see from here that Beis Shammai did like Beis Shammai. We could bring a riot to that question. Gemara says no. We're going to give 3 different answers as to how to explain the Tanakama's opinion vis-a-vis vis-a-vis Acherim. Acherim are saying she's an islandess. Tanakama are saying what? First answer is that Tanakama is saying she was also an islandess. Meaning, again, this is an argument in Mitzias, right? Meaning, was she an islandess or not? So the Tanakama is going to say she was an islandess, and it's talking about a case of hikirba. If you remember before, hikirba means when he married her, he knew she was an islandess, which means there's no retroactive removal of the marriage. So therefore, when Rabbi Gamliel's brother Abba died, she was falling to him. The tzara was a tzara of an islandess who was the islandess was falling as well. So she's pater from Yibam. Over here, the tzara is going to be okay, connected. Whereas the Acherim are saying v'lo hikirba is talking about where he didn't recognize her. And therefore, since it's talking about a case where he didn't recognize her, there the marriage is uprooted. So really, he's introducing a more obvious case, Acherim. When it's retroactively uprooted, there for sure the tzara is going to be mutter because it's not even a case of 2 wives. Whereas the Tanakama agrees that it's talking about a case of 2 wives. It's just that on islandess is pater. We hold the halacha is, meaning according to the second sheet of Acherim, you could hold that a tzara's islandess is chayiv in Yibam. Sorry, is Aser in Yibam. You could hold that she's Petura like an Erva, but it doesn't matter. We're talking about where it's Lo Hikirba, and therefore it uproots the marriage to begin with. But the Tanakama holds that no, a Tzaras island, you must hold that a Tzaras islandess is Chayiv in Yibam, because if you didn't, it wouldn't make sense why he was allowed to do it. She's an Eshesach. Right. Second answer. Ika beinayu. That's the first answer. V'iba is same. Kanas ulabasayv girish ika beinayu. So again, let's remind ourselves. Tanakama holds that he was allowed to marry the tzara, and the Acherim say that the reason why was because she was an islandess. So what are they arguing in? So it says the Gemara, we're talking about where he divorced her. Let's say let's say we're talking about here Rabbi Gamliel and Abba. So Abba, the brother, was married to Rabbi Gamliel's daughter, and Dina, the tzara, right? And Acherim are saying that Bita Shel Rabbi Gamliel was an islandess, and that's why, since she was an islandess, that's why Dina is okay, because Halil said that a tzara's islandess is going to be mutter, meaning she's chayv and yibum. What is the Tanakama saying? Why was he allowed to be miyabim the tzara? Meaning, if it was a regular girl. Says the Gemara, we're talking about a case where there was also a divorce here, right? And since there was a divorce,
Who you divorced?
so Abba divorced the daughter.
Well, you divorced the daughter.
Divorced the daughter. And we learned in our Mishnah that if you divorce before Abba dies, before Shimon dies, in our typical example,
So,
and the tzar is mutter. But we saw machlekes earlier that it might depend on whether they divorced and then got married to the tzara, or if it was even in a case, which the way we learned was that if it's where they were divorced first and then got married, right? Means was divorced first, then got married, or was it that they married together and then got divorced? So we saw that was potentially a machlekes between Rava and I forgot who the other opinion was about whether we'll say that our Mishnah and the later Mishnah are arguing, or if our Mishnah and later Mishnah are both saying the same thing, right? So if you say that they're arguing, you could say that that's exactly what's going on over here. That the Tanakh, who is saying that there's going to be mutter to be with the tzara, is saying the reason why that's the case is because we're talking about a case where the divorce happened first, right? And he holds, the divorce happened after. And since the divorce happened after, that's the case of our Mishnah. The Tanakh is going to say that she's a grusha, and therefore when Abba died, all he had was Dina falling to Rabbi Gamliel, so he's of course allowed to do the Yibum. Whereas she's not exactly, because when he died, there was no erva there. Whereas the Acherim are going to hold that in that scenario, even though when Abba died, he only had one wife, since the daughter and the tzara were married to Abba at the same time, that's already called the tzara serva, and on that alone, that would pater. So therefore, he has to come on to explain it. The only reason why the tzara is going to be chayiv is because Rabbi Gamliel's daughter is an islandess. That's the second answer. Which is a completely separate discussion. This is a halacha like this. Normally, if a man marries a woman and he says to her, I'm marrying you, and the condition should be good in front of Adam, and he says, but it's on condition that after we're together, you don't have any obvious mumin. Mum is like a blemish. Now, there are certain things you'd be able to see. Let's say she has like a big, wart on her face. You see it. But if it turns out that she has some sort of a physical blemish and you just can't see it because she's dressed sanua.
What would be the reason for such a tanai?
Man likes to look at his wife, likes to be attracted to her.
No, meaning if let's assume for a second that if he had known that there was such a crave for moon that he wouldn't have married in the first place, then retroactively it's not foul.
That's exactly the point. That's the reason.
Why would you make the tanai? Meaning even if you didn't make the tanai, it would be foul.
You don't know.
I don't say. I'm not sure. I'm not sure what he's saying.
Let's say you married somebody and you didn't.
No, I think he's asking a sophisticated question, but I just want to make sure. Go ahead.
Yeah. So let's say you married.
You're saying even if I didn't make the tanai, would I have the out of it being a mekach tos?
Yeah, it's implicit.
It's a good question. Not sure. Not 100% sure.
Okay.
Meaning, why do I have to set it? Meaning, could be the mekach tos wouldn't apply. It could be. Well, here the discussion over here, by the way, just to clarify, is not simply a question of the blemish being an uprooted based off of a mekach tos. The specific issue they're having here is everyone agrees I can make the tanai. Let's say, for instance, I would hold that the blemish would be enough to make it a mekach tos. What we're discussing over here is what happened if I made a tanai, and then they had sex after they got married. So that means he acted with his wife as if he's okay with it. Can we say even after the act of bia that finding the mum can be uprooted lemafreya or not? Do we say the act of bia itself is like a tacit approval of her, or no? We say not. That's a discussion of the Gemara. Actually, I take that back. I'm not sure who the machlekes is.
It's similar to divorcing your wife and going to a hotel with
Pundik. We saw yesterday.
You're retracting.
Yeah. So says the Gemara. That's the machlekes. Meaning to say, what are we talking about here? Abba, the brother of Rabbi Gamliel, has a scenario where he married the daughter B'tanai. Right? He married Rabbi Gamliel's daughter B'tanai. And therefore, the Tanakama is going to say that when you make the Tanai and have the Bia, that the Tanai works to uproot it, even though you've had the Bia. For since it uproots it, the Bita is not married anymore, so therefore the Tzara is mutter. According to the Acherim, that Tanai does not work, and therefore since it doesn't work, they're still married, in which case then the Tzara is still a Tzaras Erva. You'll have to explain that the daughter was an islandess, which is very interesting, what we just made, according to this last answer, Rabbi Gamliel's daughter. According to Acherim, she is a daughter who is an islandess that is going to l'chayra be hikirba, right? That means he knows that she's an islandess, but thinks she doesn't have any additional mumin. Now he finds out she does have additional mumin, has bia with her, and according to this last answer, it's considered like he's accepted the mum, which I think is consistent. If he's someone who's comfortable marrying an islandess, who he knew was an islandess, he's probably the type of guy who can be convinced to accept the mum also. And that's why we have to come on to it being an islandess situation who's Paturim in Ayibum to come on to saying that the Tzara is mutter. Regardless, those are the three answers. It's a little bit complicated, but what's relevant to us in our Gemara is that we were trying to prove that Beis Shammai holds like Beis Shammai. And how would you prove that from here? By saying Rabbi Gamliel was one of his Talmidim, and he was acting like Beis Shammai by saying you're mutter to be with the Tzara. But the answer is, of course, he wasn't a Talmud of Beis Shammai. He was a Talmud of Beis Hillel, in which case then this is something else, either islandess or Tanai, or one of these other, or it was a Gurusha. Regardless, he was allowed to marry the Tzara according to both Acherim and the Tanakama. Must have Rav Mishar Shei Ma'isa Rabbi Akiva, another Ma'isa, and this is going to see another case where Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel argue, and we're going to try to prove that Rabbi Akiva did something in accord with Beis Shammai, and it was in order to, and we're going to prove from here that Beis Shammai acted like Beis Shammai, different than Beis Hillel. What's the case?
Asu.
Exactly. So says the Gemara, Ma'isa Rabbi Akiva shalikat esrog b'echad b'shvat. Right, so why is the date of Echad B'Shvat important? We know that when you're talking about Meiser, there's a machlekes between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel. When do we say Rosh Hashanah Le'ilanos is for Meiser? Do we say that it's Tu B'Shvat, which is the Shita of Beis Hillel, the 15th of Shvat, or do we say no, it's Rosh Chodesh Shvat, the 1st of Shvat? So the 2 weeks, the beginning of Shvat, according to one, it's the second, it's the prior year, and according to the other one, it's the next year. So let's say it's on a year where it switches from Meiser Sheni to Meiser Ani. So it can either be in a 2 into 3. Or year 5 into 6, whichever one it is, then it'll come out for those 2 weeks. According to the Beis Shammai, it's already turned into the new year. It's already the 3rd or the 6th year, where now all of a sudden the Meiser you're giving should not be Meiser Sheni, it should be Meiser Ani. Whereas according to Beis Hillel, it is still the old year, year 2 and year 5, for another 2 weeks. So what about during those 2 weeks? What are you supposed to do? If you have Meiser during those 2 weeks, who should you give it to? Right? According to Beis Shammai, you should be giving it already to the Ani, and according to Beis Hillel, you should still be giving bring it to the Beis HaMikdash to eat for the Levium. Right? Actually, no, not for the Levium, for yourself, Meiser Sheni.
Meiser Sheni is not for Levium?
No, that's Meiser Rishon. Meiser Sheni is for us. And you're supposed to take it to Yerushalayim to eat it in Yerushalayim.
So and what's Meiser Kohen? Kohen is
Truma.
Truma. Then
Truma is for the Kohen. Meiser Rishon is for the Levi. Then the Levi has to give Trumas Meiser on his Meiser Rishon to the Kohen, and then you have to give Meiser Sheni, Meiser Ani to Aniyim in years 3 and year 6, and you take years 1, 2, 4, and 5. The Meiser Sheni to Yerushalayim or some equivalent of it by putting on money and eating it in Yerushalayim. Okay, and Shvius don't do anything. Okay, so says the Gemara. What do you see? Rabbi Akiva was melaket and liket esrog be'echad b'shvat v'nog boy bezi surin echad k'divrei Beis Shammai ve'echad k'divrei Beis Hillel. Meaning he did Meiser Ani like Beis Shammai and he did Meiser Sheni like Beis Hillel. So what do you see from here? Shema mina. So why did he even need to do this? If Beis Shammai never was noyeg anything other than Beis Hillel. Now, I'll just point out over here, to me, and again, I'm not sure if this is a fair argument or not, but one could theoretically speaking make the argument that this question of asu v'lo asu really is only relevant when you have negative consequences to other people. Like, can I marry this lady? She's a mamzeres, or maybe she's a psul, or there's major issues in terms of there's a ripple effect of this decision. But when you're talking about something that really, like this, meaning I'm not saying that there isn't a reason to be Mekayim both, but here I don't see it being a problem that Rabbi Akiva would try to do like both, meaning that would be like saying, like when the Ramah says, or the Mishnah Berurah says, if Efshel L'Kayim Shneim, it's better to be Mekayim Shneim. No one's arguing that Beis Shammai is not something you should listen to.
But it's a paradox. If Beis Shammai themselves didn't do it in practice,
so what I'm saying is that it could very well be, and this would be my question, is why would Beis Shammai not be doing like Beis Hillel? Is it because of the Baskol, which we saw yesterday, that I sort of understand? Once the Baskol comes out and says, Allah is like Beis Hillel, then they were saying it even for Beis Shammai, then even for these little smaller things, he should have to act like that. But if it was beforehand, and it was just a question of Rove and whether they should listen to or should not listen to, I could hear the argument that Beis Shammai was only noheg dinam of Beis Hillel when it came to those things that affect people. But here it's, hey, if Beis Shammai himself might have said, no, give Meiser Sheni, give Meiser Rani, or maybe Beis Shammai would do both. Like, it doesn't hurt anyone. If the guy wants to give 2 Meisters, let him give 2 Meisters. Like, so I'm not.
There's almost always some effect.
Yes, there's. It can't. Listen, if they're having the argument, there's a practical nafkamina.
We started with Rish Lakish and Rabbi Yochanan.
Correct.
Rish Lakish said they didn't do. Rabbi Yochanan said asu. Then we quoted him on Rav and Shmuel. Now, Rav and Shmuel, I don't think we're even talking about Yevamos. They're talking about all
Completely. Yeah.
So it seems that it was global.
Yeah, correct.
Yeah.
Either way, says the Gemara, let's bring a raya from here that asu that Beis Shammai did like their own words, and Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai did different things. Because you see that Rabbi Akiva was trying to be Mekayim both. Says the Gemara, no. Rabbi Akiva Gemara is topically. He was unsure. He had his own suffix, but really, and Nechanami v'layadi Beis Hillel be'echa b'shvat omer b'tesvav b'shvat omer. But Nechanami, he was trying to Mekayim Beis Hillel. He just forgot what Beis Hillel said. Unbelievable. Common. You heard what he just said. Rabbi Akiva forgot whether Beis Hillel said that the day Rosh Hashanah for Meiser was Echa B'Shvat.
That's right.
Whatever it is, I'm trying to make the point that the great Rabbi Akiva didn't know something. He didn't know if it was Echa B'Shvat or Tu B'Shvat. Yeah, but okay, Mishnayos are just written down quotes of
they all forgotten.
Whatever. My point I'm trying to make, which no one's letting it, is that we should just acknowledge that even Rabbi Akiva either forgot or didn't know a Mefurish Mishnah. So we should never be thinking that oh my gosh, how could I not know this, or I didn't remember this. It happens. It even happens to the best of us, and certainly Rabbi Akiva is from the greatest. All right, what did it say? Moshe Rabbeinu says in the Medrash that you have this person Rabbi Akiva darshaning all the different things on the Tagim and the Yudim and everything like that, and you bring the Torah by me. And Rabbi Akiva didn't know this mission. That means we all have a chance to become great like Rabbi Akiva. Says the Gemara Weiler, Masiv Marzutra, another mice over here. We're talking here about the halachas of chinuch. Misham B'Sil have a machlekes and sukkah, right? What's the halacha when you have a tinoik, a baby, right? A baby in terms of chinuch that still needs its mother, right? So let's say it's in the crib, still needs its mother. Is there a din chinuch for such a child? Meaning to say, let's say a 2-year-old, a 3-year-old, whatever it is, it still needs its mother for whatever reason. Let's say it's a 20-month-old baby, still nursing, let's say, but he's already mature enough. He could talk, he could walk, he can, he sees a sukkah, he knows what's going on. Do you have a chiyuv to give him chinuch or not? Beis Hillel says you don't, Beis Shammai says you do. So there was a Maisa, Marzutra, the following Brayso, Maisa v'yol the kolosah shel Shammai Hazaken. Shammai Hazaken, which we'll get to it. I'm assuming you're going to have a question, but just, if you do, don't. Well, in the moment the question's going to come. Don't ask it.
I didn't have it.
You will. Maisa v'yol the kolosah shel Shammai Hazaken. Shammai Hazaken. By the way, Beis Shammai, it was a group of rabbis who were all from this original Shammai, the Shammai Hazaken, the earliest one. Beis Shammai, there was no Shammai in the Beis Medrash, unless they named their kids after their great rabbi. But the actual Shammai that we talk about was dead. Beis Shammai was the rabbis of a later generation who were in his school. It's sort of like, it's like a Yezke Chabad now. The Alter Rebbe said, but he's not around anymore, no matter who you think, because, we're talking about the first Rebbe, right? The first Rebbe is definitely, everyone's masking, he's for sure in the ground, right? So nothing to talk about. So if that's the case, that's what's happening over here. Shammai Hazaken is dead. The Beis Medrash here is Beis Shammai. So just point out, Beis Shammai asu u'lo yasu. Are we having that question about Shammai himself too? That's the question I thought you were going to ask. Meaning, we're bringing a story from Shammai Hazaken. Is that ever a question? Do we even?
Maybe at the end of his life, the gospel already happened.
So that's
we don't know.
Okay, and economic possible.
Something being assumed.
Something, but. Yeah. But the Gemara is assuming in its question that Shammai Hazaken, even himself, did like Hillel Hazaken, which I just find interesting. Not crazy to think it, but the Gemara's question was never about Hillel and Shammai. It was about Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, the later generations. Yep. How were they know it? Either way, says the Gemara.
It's going very far.
Yeah. Masa Marzutra, Maisa b'yolda kolosah shel Shammai Hazaken. So who is this? So Shammai Hazaken, his son's wife, kolosah, his daughter-in-law, right? And she had a child. This child was a boy who, when he's older, is going to have a mitzvah of sukkah. And now he's a child who needs Shammai's daughter, his mother, to nurse or whatever it is. And this is exactly the kid that Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, or better yet, Shammai and Hillel had a machlek about whether such a child requires chinuch or not. And it was sukkah. Upiches es hamazeva, opened up the roof a little bit, right? The sichech al gabe mita, meaning the mother doesn't need to be sitting in the sukkah because she's potter from the mitzvah. So she's inside the house with the baby, but maybe the baby needs a sukkah. So what did he did? It shows him the unbelievable, the Mesiras Nefesh for chinuch. He popped a hole in his roof, put some schach down on top, so that place where the kid was sitting, right above the bed, right above the crib, he would be looking up and saying schach. Same atzel, yeah. Bishvil katan. Shmamina asu. You see clearly from this ma'isa that it wasn't just an academic machlekes between Shammai and Hillel, but rather Shammai went ahead and was knowing the halacha like this. He went and poked a hole in his roof. More no. Hasam, that case over there, haroya oimer la'afushe avir ka'avid. Again, here it's a little bit complicated because we weren't really discussing like this guy to do. We were discussing something else. We were discussing whether they did or didn't do like they don't. So some Rishonim say that this question actually, because of what I said before, isn't really even asking the question of asu loy asu. This is back to a losis go to do shaila. Hillel and Zaken and Shammai and Zaken lived in the same neighborhood, and if Shammai is going to pass in one way, not like Hillel, so here it's difficult because the lashon is shma mina asu. It's clearly the Gemara is asking that question. So Rishonim have girsa shailas here. But the way we're going to explain the Gemara is that it's a really a losis go to do question. The question was, why did Beis Shammai do this? Isn't this a problem of Leisis going to do? And that means Shema Mina Asu here does not mean what it's meant everywhere else on the daf. Shema Mina Asu, and therefore it's Leisis going to do. And the answer is no. Leisis going to do is only an issue when the reason why you're doing something has to be because of the mitzvah. Maybe Beis Shammai just didn't have a good air conditioning in his house, wanted to open the roof.
People would say that.
That's what people are going to say. Apparently,
Really, he did it.
But really, he did it for the real reason. But he was allowed to because it's not Leisis going to do. If you can hide your action in some sort of old message, then it would be fine. Nasib Marzutra, Maisa B'Shokas Yehu. Shokas Yehu. It's a little bit of a mikvah. Shaila, don't get nervous. This came up actually in Chagiga. We know that you can have two mikvahs, let's say, that are next to each other, that each one of them is less than the amount of 40 saw, right? There's something called hashaka. Hashaka means that as long as you have the water connected from one to the other, it works to connect the two to put the shear together. This is actually how all of our mikvahs work. When you go into the mikvah, inside a mikvah, you're not actually sitting in rainwater. You're sitting in faucet water that is connected to rainwater, which is in some sort of a bar somewhere up on the roof, usually, whatever it is, however they do it. And it's connected through a pipe, and that pipe has to be a thickness of, at least as we'll see in the Gemara now when we saw Chagiga, the thickness of 2 fingers that you can go inside the pipe and turn your hand back and forth if there's enough area for it to go.
I thought it was next door to it.
That's, you could put a hole in the wall. That's the way that a lot of them do it also. But the idea... Anyway, we're not doing Hilchos Mikvahs now. Okay, what's that?
No.
Yeah. So you have 2... Okay, you could do like that. I'm just...
I remember.
Yeah. So fine. So they're next to each other. But either way, the size of the hole, that's what we're discussing. How big does the size of the hole have to be? So it says like this. There was this place in Yerushalayim that everyone would go to bring their kalim, to be matayir them. And it was in a shukas yehu from hashaka. That's where the language comes from. It was connected. So it itself didn't have the shear that, let's say, was necessary for it to be a good mikvah. But it was next to a deeper reservoir bar or whatever it was that did, and therefore it would have been fine to use it. So Ma'isa b'shukas yehu shahayis b'Yerushalayim.
It says by Rachel about the arkada el shokas.
Is that yeah? Okay, yeah.
Record, the animals.
So here it comes from that language though of hashaka, of kissing, meaning you have one bar next to the other bar, and they're connected through some sort of a hole. Shahayis b'Yerushalayim. So it was this little mikvah, kedli mikvah, v'hayis nekuva lemikvah, and it had a hole in it to connect it to the actual source of water. Everyone would use this mikvah to be matayir their kaleb. Beis Shammai sent some of his henchmen to go out to this mikvah and to make the hole bigger. There was a machlekes. He held not like Hillel, not like Beis Hillel, because what's Beis Hillel's opinion? Utnan. Like we said earlier, it needs to be 2 fingers going around. So Beis Shammai held that was not enough, that the hashaka wasn't enough if it was just like 2 inches wide. That has to be made bigger up until rove of the wall separating the 2 things are going to be open, meaning it's a significantly larger area. Now, Shema Mina Asu here is clearly going back. It sounds to saying like he's holding like Beis Shammai. Meaning Shammai held like Beis Shammai. The Gemara, the Rishonim speak out over here. This also is a Leisis Gaidu question. Meaning Beis Shammai sending the shlichim out to do this when the halacha is like Beis Hillel in the city of Yerushalayim. It's Leisis Guide to do. It looks like you're two Torahs. Meaning, which one is it? Is it a kosher mikveh or not? So the Gemara says over here, Hasam also. Since it's not clear for sure that the reason why you're opening the mikveh up a little bit more is in order for the halacha, maybe it's just to make the water flow better, so that when people are going to go and dip in the mikveh or take their kelim in the mikveh, there's more water there, but it has nothing to do with halacha, and therefore it's not a problem of Leisis Guide. Tashma.
Really is clear. Come on.
Yeah, I think the first case is even more clear. I mean, I'm thinking of
Breaking your house.
breaking your house to. The neshama should have an aliyah. The bug.
No, we missed it.
Oh, he missed it. Okay. Tashma. A little bit of a long raisa, but a very funny and a fun story over here. It's going to come up a little bit of chagiga and tumentara, gishmaka stuff over here. Tashma. When I was learning Torah by this chashuv person, Rabbi Yochanan Achorni, sorry. I saw that he was Mekayim, the dinim office of the Memches Dvarim Shatari Nicholas Ben, and one of them is the 48 ways of wisdom, as they say in Eshet Torah. Yeah, one of the ways was Pas Melech Teichel, Maim B'Shur Tishta. He was eating Pas Melech, Pas Chareva, like black bread dipped in salt. He was so poor, he had nothing, but he was a big Talmud Chacham. He was a tzaddik. I was learning Torah from him, and I felt he was eating this B'Shnei B'Tzayres during the famine years, and therefore Basi. I went and told my father Reb Tzaddik, right? His name was Reb Elazar Bar Tzaddik. He went to his father Reb Tzaddik and said, Tati, my Rebbe's starving. He's eating nothing. Amarli, he said to me, take these zaysim. Apparently Reb Tzaddik had a lot of zaysim. He says, go take him these zaysim. So I took him to him. But when he saw, and he opened up the barrel that I was handing to him, he saw that the olives were wet. And we know, just very basic halacha in Hilchos Tumah V'Tara, that in order for food to become tamei, it has to be what's referred to as mukhshir l'tumah. There's an entire Masechta Machshirin that goes through all of these halachas. All right? So he saw that the olives were wet. Wet with what? What's referred to as mayal. Mayal is the excreted oil from the first excretions of the olives. It's not something that you would use as olive oil, but it is the beginning of the olive oil. And there's a machlekes, Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel, about whether we consider that mayhel may peiros, in which case then it's not. If it's may peiros, then it's just considered like the mayhel is just considered like the liquid from the fruit. Then it's not one of the zayin mashkin that makes something mukhshir l'tumah. Whereas the other shita holds that no, it's considered shemen. It's like oil, and oil is one of the 7 mashkin that makes it mukhshir l'tumah. So says the Gemara that Rabbi Yochanan Achorni saw this barrel of olives wet. He says, Amarli einani oichel zaysim. He covered it up by saying, I don't eat olives. He tried to, like a tsanua, he said, olives are not my taste, as I tell my kids, right? But really, he says to him, I'm not a stupid guy. Says Reb Elazar Bar Tzaddik, he says, I knew why he was doing this. He was doing this because he felt that maybe perhaps an Amaretz touched it, and it was mukhshel l'tumah, and he doesn't want to eat it because it's tamei. So Basi v'hidaiti as Abba, I went back to my father, and I told him the whole Maisa. And Amarli, he said to me, Reb Tzaddik chapped what's going on. He says, Leich ve'emer lo, go and tell him, chavis nekuva haisa, that the barrel where the olives were stored in was a barrel that was filled with a lot of a lot of olives, and the mahol, this liquid that was on it, it had a hole in the side, right? Why did it have a hole in the side? Because we specifically wanted that the may peiros, that the mahol that was on top of it, we wanted it to come out the bottom. Now, why is that important? It's very important to clarify. I know you understand. I want to make sure everyone else understands. The mahol, in order for something to become mukhshir l'tumah, it's not enough that it gets wet. The owner of that fruit has to want the water on the fruit. If it's not nichale in the lashon of the Gemara, if it's not something that he wants the water to be there, then that's not machshir l'tumah. So what he was saying to him was, yes, you saw mahol. What's that?
Is that like psik ratio? What's the same word?
No, psik ratio is a little bit of a different halacha. Yeah, it's the same concept that makes a psik ratio de lo nichale, maybe it could be. Yeah, so that's working on malachas machshavas, but the concept of nichale is the same. Meaning we want that the owner wants the water there, even for any reason. If he wants the water there, then that's considered that it's mukhshel l'tumah. So he's saying to him like this. He's saying, don't be nervous, even though the halacha would be that according to what you're thinking, it's going to become mukhshel l'tumah because this is called shemen, and if it's called shemen, therefore it's a problem because it's mukhshel l'tumah. It's not, because that shemen that's on top of the oil, the olives, we had put a hole in the side to make it go out, So if that's the case, how come there's oil all over the olives? The sediment from the olives had filled it in. So it comes out that really all of that oil that's on top of that, all those olives are not considered going to make it mukhshel l'tumah. Utanan chavishal zeisim migulgalim. If you have a barrel of olives that are all stuffed together inside a barrel, beishamai oimrim ein tzricha lenakev. You don't have to make a hole. Why not? Because it's mei peris. Meaning, according to him, the fact that they're covered in liquid does not make it mukhshel l'tumah. Whereas Beis Hillel holds it is mukhshel l'tumah because he holds Beis Hillel oimrim tzricha lenakev. You do need to make a hole in order to show that you don't want the oil on it because he holds it's oil, and the oil is one of the 7 liquids that make something mukhshel l'tumah. Umodim, however, Beis Hillel agrees she'im nikva that if you made the hole, v'sasmu shmarim, that and for whatever reason the sediment closed up the hole, and now all of a sudden you have oil all over these olives that you would think they're mukhshel l'tumah. Says the Mishnah shehi tayrit that Beis Hillel would agree because since it's not nichale for me to have the shemen on the olives, therefore it's not going to be tar. Sorry, it's not going to be tummy. It's going to be tar. Now, what's the question? This whole story. Let's just work out what happened. Guy's poor. He's teaching his Talmud Torah. Talmud realizes he's got no food. He goes to his dad. Says, "Dad, I need some olives to go bring to the guy." He says, brings it to him. He doesn't take them because they got oil all over it. Sounds to me like he thought that they were tummy, meaning he holds like who? Who does he hold like? He holds like Beis Hillel, which makes sense, right? And the response was, "Don't worry. Tell him that we put a hole in the side and it makes it okay according to Beis Hillel."
Beis Hillel.
Right?
Even though he was
right. So says the Gemara. V'afal pisha Talmud Shammai haya. Reb Tzadok was a Talmud of Shammai. Kol ma'asav lo yoseh ela k'divrei Beis Hillel. This last line is the only reason why we brought this whole ma'asav over here. It says, what do you mean even though? If Shammai did like Beis Hillel, you don't have to say this line. The reason why he was telling it to him was because everyone holds like Beis Hillel. So Amr's Bishlama also like Beis Shammai, Hainu de Rebuse. There's a big chiddush that he's saying to here that he went ahead and acted like Beis Hillel, even though he's a Talmud of Beis Shammai. Eli Amr's also, but if you tell me that even Beis Shammai themselves didn't do like Beis Shammai, rather did like Beis Hillel, then what's this big chiddush? My Rebuse, he's doing like everyone else does, who's a Talmud of Beis Shammai, which is to act like Beis Hillel. So this Gemara doesn't have an answer to. So here we're saying you see clearly that it must be that Beis Shammai Taka was Nayeg, like their own Shita, which in the Maskana is going to be what we come out with, which would then consistently make sense throughout the rest of Shas when we don't ever find the Gemara saying, why did Beis Shammai do this? I thought he never did this, right? Says the Gemara, Tashma, another brayso. Shola was Rabbi Yehoshua ben Chananya. This is the famous Rabbi Yehoshua, the Rabbi Yehoshua of Brachas fame with Rabbi Gamliel. Tzoras Habas Mahu. They asking, okay, after this whole discussion of Beis Shammai, Beis Hillel, wonderful. We see clearly that we went ahead, Beis Shammai did like Beis Shammai, not like Beis Hillel. What's the halacha by Tzoras Habas? Now, this isn't just simply asking the halacha. We're going to be bringing from here a question about Osur and Layosu. Says the Gemara, Amar Lahem, Machlekes Beis Shammai Beis Hillel, v'halacha gedivrei mi. Right? He says, the halacha is like who? Amar Lahem, he said back to them, what are you doing sticking my head between two mountains over here? You ask me about how to pick and choose between Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel? I'm going to stick my nose in that machlekes? That's none of my business to pick a side there. Ben shtei machlekes gedolas ben Beis Shammai Beis Hillel? No way, I'm never going to do this. Why? Meaning shtei machlukos gedolas, these two groups.
Oh, two sides.
Yeah. Ben Beis Shammai and Beis Hillel from these two sides. He's basically just, with emphasis, pointing out that I am not sticking my nose in this. This is two great groups, two chashuv people, over my dead body. I'm not.
It's like when they asked the Grove.
Over my head, exactly.
It's like when they asked the Grove about Rabbi Yonah Sanayvishus and Rabbi Yaakov Emden, he said the same thing.
Yeah.
He probably got the words from here.
Yeah. So he says, Misyare ani, here's the line that's important. Misyare ani shema yarutzu golgalti. They're going to kill me. Who's he talking about? Meaning, it comes out, if he picks a side, someone's going to be really, major PO'd over here. Because if he picks the Beis Hillel side, that looks like Beis Hillel, then it comes out that according to Beis Shammai, these ladies are usher to marry someone else, and the children are going to be puzzled to kahuna. And if he passes like Beis Shammai, saying that you got to do Yibum, and then people start doing Yibum, then it's going to come out that it's Mamzerim according to Beis Hillel. The same discussion we brought up earlier in the Gemara. So he's saying, I can't pick a side because someone's kids are going to come after me.
I thought it's okay. I think Beis Hillel said it wasn't okay. It was okay, and Beis Shammai said it wasn't.
Beis Shammai says you can marry the tzara. Sorry, Beis Hillel says you do Yibum with the tzara. Okay, you got me confused. Beis Shammai says do Yibum with the tzara, and Beis Hillel says you don't. So Beis Shammai, who says you do Yibum with the tzara, means that she's a shemeres yava.
Yeah.
So that means when Beis Hillel, who holds you're not supposed to do Yibum, says that she's going to go marry someone else, then the child from her relationship is going to be a Ben Zaina. Because according to Beis Shammai, she is still a Shemeres Yavam. The flip side is that according to Beis Hillel, if the women in Beis Shammai start doing Yibum, according to Beis Hillel, you're doing Yibum with someone who's an Eishes Ach Shalom B'Makam Mitzvah. That's an erva, and therefore the child thinks this is be a mamzer. So either way, we're going to have children running around that are not going to be happy with Rabbi Yeshua, because says the Gemara, but I'll tell you the following thing. I'm not picking and choosing sides in that machlekes because I don't need someone putting out a hit on me. Yeah. However, I'll tell you the following thing. I'll tell you the following. The two great families in Yerushalayim. Mishpachas based Tzvuim miben Achmai, u'mishpachas based Kupai miben Mekushash. I'm not sure how to pronounce it. Two very chashuv families, which shehem b'nei tzaros. They were the progeny of a tzaros erva, which again puts them smack in the middle of this discussion about their status. And they did the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, no questions asked. Which sounds to me like they meaning. Let's work it out. Meaning, according to Beis Shammai, they would be problematic.
Right.
Sounds like Bezil. Now it says the Gemara, so it's funny, they don't bring a raya from that second part. Right? The raya they're bringing is from the first part where he's saying, I'm scared. What are you scared of? Meaning, and here the assumption is that he's only scared if he's creating mamzerus, that he's not scared if he's just saying that someone's going to not be allowed to do avoid in the Beis Hamikdash. Right? So it's the Gemara saying, Bishlama, that it's asu, meaning that Beis Shammai held like himself. And if Beis Shammai held like himself, then what happens is that it comes out that they were telling ladies to do yibum when according to Beis Hillel they would create mamzerim. If they did that, right, it makes sense that he'd be scared because now he's calling people mamzerim, who according to Beis Shammai are not mamzerim. Right? Meaning that's the first thing. So the Gemara wants to prove from here that it must be that Beis Shammai actually did act, which again is consistent with the raya we just saw a minute ago above. And even if you'll say that they did do it, meaning to say, and that makes sense why he was saying I'm scared because they're mamzerim. I have another question. My misyariani, why would Rabbi Yeshua be scared? Meaning, what did we just say? The reason why he's scared is because he's creating mamzerim. But according to Rabbi Yeshua, they're not mamzerim. Why? Says the Gemara, Rabbi Yeshua's opinion is you only create a mamzer. He has an interesting opinion even beyond what we would normally say. He says it's not enough that they're a kares. In order for the mamzer to be created, they'd have to be a chayve mises bezdin. Meaning, who are we talking about over here? We're talking about a tzaras erva. What's a tzaras erva? A tzaras erva is an eishes ach. Eishes ach is only a kares. If it was kalosa, if it was these other ervas, okay, I understand. Those are chayv mises bezdin. Chayv mises bezdin, he would agree. That's a mamzer. So why was Rabbi Yeshua scared? You tell me he was also. Why was he scared? Now, this question to me is a little bit of a difficult question because if you think about it, who says that the Talmidim of Beis Shammai hold like Rabbi Yeshua? Meaning, the concern he has is people are going to come kill him because he's calling them mamzerim. And the response is, no, he's not, because he doesn't hold them mamzerim. But he is saying that he'd be picking sides. He's saying, I'll pick sides and say the halach is like Beis Hillel. If you say the halach is like Beis Hillel, you just created mamzerim. They are going to think they're mamzerim because they don't agree with you. So then I don't really understand what the Gemara means to say over here, misyarayani. Misyarayani, I guess, means if they're anyways going to be paying attention to my psak halacha, they're going to have to pay attention to my entire psak halacha, which is a strange thing, I think, really. But okay. Says the Gemara, either way, nihinami the mamzer leheve, still pogam yahave. Right? And why is that true? Because it's a kal v'chaymer. What's the kal v'chaymer? What are we talking about? I mean, we're talking about that even if it's not going to be a mamzer, but the kares relationship will certainly create a chalal, right? And he says, and I'll bring you a kal v'chaymer to prove it. What's the kal v'chaymer? Me almana. What's the halacha by almana? And almana is not allowed to marry a kohen gadol, right? And he's the only one she's not allowed to marry. Says the Gemara, Uma almana she'eni surah noheg b'koil. She's only usher to marry a kohen gadol. If she does marry a kohen gadol and have a child, b'not pogam, that child cannot do avodah as a regular kohen, right? Zu, this woman, she'isura shavalakol, meaning everyone is potentially usher as an eshesach. There's nothing unique about, meaning, yes, she's only usher to this brother, but potentially she's usher as an eshesach. Because again, what are we talking about here? We're talking about the case of a tzaras erva, right? A tzaras erva is an eshesach. It's just that according to Yeshua, she's not chayav mises bezdin, Right? She's not. The child is not a mamzer. Why? Because according to him, it's got to be Mrs. Bezdin. So this child is a chalal from a kal v'chaymer. If the almana creates a chalal, even though she's not usher on the whole world, only on usher on one person, this woman who's doing an aveira of eishes ach, everyone's usher. This is a much bigger, more serious aveira. Certainly, din, right? That the Gemara doesn't finish it off, but I'm speaking it out loud. Of course, the child's going to be a chalal, and therefore, because of that, I'm still scared people are going to come after me. Now, again, it's just interesting. For some reason, this he's scared of. He's scared of the chalalim coming after him being as a byproduct of an erva relationship, but he's not scared of the chalalim coming after him that would be chalalim according to Beis Hillel. If he says the halach is like Beis Shammai, that you can do, right? Meaning, because according to them, according to Beis Shammai, they're shomeris yavam, which is an isser lav, in which case then, if you have a child in that relationship, that'll also be a chalal.
Right, it seems a little inconsistent.
Yeah. But either way, yeah, go ahead.
So just to clarify, so he's not afraid that if he says like the regular thing like Beis Hillel that there's a chalal, but he is afraid.
No, he is. No, he is. At first, we thought he was afraid because of mamzerim. Then we proved that Rabbi Yeshua doesn't hold that. Right. And what we're explaining is that he's still scared because they might not be mamzerim, but they're still halalim. Why are they halalim? Because it's a kal v'chaymer. It's a kal v'chaymer from an almana. So therefore, and just let's make sure we know what the case we're talking about here. We're talking about a tzaras erva. She's an eishes actually b'makom mitzvah. And what he's saying is that the child from that relationship, although you're right, I don't hold it becomes a mamzer, it still becomes a chalal. And therefore, I'm nervous that some guy's going to come down the street and say to me, "Hey, I was about to do the avodah in the Beis Hamikdash, and you're now making me a chalal." Now, it's an interesting thing here.
The answer could be because they're kohanim.
Well, no, that's the only scenario. Yeah, they have to be. If it's not a chalal, then if it's not
it's because they're kohanim.
Of course, if he's not a kohen, there's no such thing as a chalal.
Because they get because you have to make sure with it because they get angry.
You're adding a new piece now that has nothing to do with this. Meaning, I agree with you. Yisrael chalal is a misnomer. It doesn't mean anything.
Right.
Yisrael can't do avodah anyways.
No, I'm saying a kohen being demoted to a Yisrael is called a chol. Now he's weak there.
Yeah, exactly. Same idea. Yeah. Okay. So says the Gemara, Kavi minei tzaros. The Gemara's bothered. 1 second. The whole kasha that was asked of Yeshua was, I asked you about the tzaros themselves, and you don't answer that question, and you give me some long, elaborate story about the children. I didn't ask you about the children. I asked you about the tzaros, right? Kaboy minei tzaros ukapashet lebnei tzaros. You tell me the answer of tzaros. Gemara says no. Tarti kaboy minei. I asked you both questions. Tzaros mai, meaning basically, let's get back to the question here. Tell me what's to do with the tzaros. The imtim tzoleimar tzaros ki Beis Hillel. That the tzaros is like Beis Hillel, meaning that they're also the Yevamos and they're allowed to go marry one in the world. B'nei tzaros the Beis Hillel, the Beis Shammai. There's a double question, meaning what's the halacha? And if you say that the halacha is like Beis Hillel, what's the halacha according to Beis Shammai with the tzaros that Beis Hillel would agree are allowed to go marry? Says Gemara, L'may nafka mina. If you tell me that halacha is like Beis Hillel and Beis Shammai is obviously going to be following that, then who cares what Beis Shammai says? Doesn't matter. Where it says no, you're right. Once you tell me what the halacha would according to Beis Shammai, I'll now know something else. Meaning, once you tell me how Beis Shammai would handle what to do with a Yevamos look, I'll be able to extrapolate from there to other lavim how to handle the halacha. Lemifshet vlad machzir grushasik lebeis Hillel. Okay, let's work this out. Beis Shammai would hold that a tzaras erva is still connected, and if she goes and marries someone else, what is she doing? A lav. Right? She's not an erva, she's a lav. She's a medically. She needs zika. She has a zika. She needs a yibam or chalitza. Now you're saying that the halach is like Beis Hillel, which means this lady's going to go off and marry David. When she does that, she's being over on a lav. According to Beis Shammai, she's being over on the lav of a little lav of Yevamos l'shuk of loisia eishes hameis chutza leishzar. So since that's a lav, she's not allowed to marry David. According to Beis Shammai, it's a lav. The Gemara says, and what's the halacha there? Meaning to say, what's the halacha of that child that David and that woman have? Says the Gemara, who cares? We don't pass like Beis Shammai. Why are you asking this question? Gemara says, no, I need to know. What would you say the halacha would be in that case? Because whatever the halacha would be in that case, according to Beis Shammai, would be the same in another case of a lav that's for us. Meaning, let's say you have a case of a tzaras, not erva, but a tzaras machzir grushasei, which we hold that the tzara, not the tzara, the machzir grushasei herself. What's the halacha of machzir grushasei? Let's remind ourselves. You have a man, he's married to a woman. We'll say Shimon is married to Dinah. Dina goes off and gets divorced, marries David, gets divorced again, and comes back and marries Shimon. The halacha is Shimon's not allowed to be with her. What if remarried her, be'isr, and he has a kid? Is that kid a chalal? Not a chalal? What's the halacha? Is it not pogum or not? So it says the Gemara, it's a kal v'chaymer. Mika Amrina kal v'chaymer. What would be the kal v'chaymer? Uma almana l'kohen gadol she'ini sura shav b'kol. Just like an almana l'kohen gadol is not allowed to marry anyone other than the kohen gadol. Sorry, can marry everyone other than the kohen gadol, and yet that's the only issur she has. And but not she has a child with that relationship. That child is a pogum, meaning a chalal. Zu she'isura shav b'kol. Everyone, theoretically speaking, every woman could be vulnerable to the issur of machzir gushasai, and therefore the law would apply to her. Eino din shebana pogum. Of course, her child's going to be a chalal. Oh, maybe not. Maybe this kal v'chaymer won't extend. Why? Dilma ikal mifrach. You can knock the kal v'chaymer down because why? Mala almana shehi atzma mischalalas. There's something unique about the almana l'kohen gadol. When an almana who is allowed to marry a kohen, breaks the avera and goes and marries a kohen gadol who she's not allowed to marry, that makes her a chalal. So even though it only applies to her, but it has such a tokef, it has such a force that the chlalos that goes into the child somehow even goes into her. So maybe that's like a chaymer that exists there that makes it not possible to learn the kal v'chaymer, to extend it to even, let's say, a machzir gushasai. It's interesting the Gemara only is bringing this up now and not earlier, but either way, and
Didn't we say that machzir gushasai in that case, the kid is going to be a mamzer?
no.
Not a mamzer?
No. Machzir gushasai is only allowed.
It's only by the law.
Yeah. So it says the Gemara, that's the suffix, right? Meaning to say, and he was asking him, what's the halach of the child? V'amarlu, and he said back to him, Tzara is yarasani, meaning the Machzir gushasai herself, I don't know, but the tzaras I am scared of. B'nei tzaras ani me'ed lechem, but I'll tell you what it is about the tzaras children. Tell you, meaning tzaras misyari ani b'nei tzaras ani me'ed lechem. Meaning I could talk to you about the tzaras themselves. Why? Because the tzaras themselves, either they're going to be usher because they're still an eshesach, or they're not going to be usher, or they're going to be usher according to Beis Shammai because it's Yevamos. However, I'm not scared of the children. The children, I need me'ed lechem, that in the end of the day we can rely on their status, because you see that there were these chashav families in Yerushalayim that they would go ahead and do the avodah of the Beis Hamikdash. So in the end of the day, what would come out from here is at least his response was saying that I'm not sticking my head into the discussion, but I am saying that however it worked out that we had no problem having them work in the Beis Hamikdash.
Even though it was allowed there, I'm confused. Even though what do you think Max Gushasai?
Well, that case wasn't the case of Machzir gushasai, right? Meaning his response was that la'olam it's not going to be a pogrom.
What? But
yeah, you asked me about the children whether they're pegumim or not. My response is they're not pegumim.
why would they not be pegumim?
They wouldn't be pegumim for the second side of the kal v'chaymer, right? Meaning to say, what's the second side of the kal v'chaymer? The second side of the kal v'chaymer would be because she makes the other one a chalal, but not the children. So too the bnei tzarais, according to Beis Shammai, are not going to be pogum, and therefore it'll extend to even the children of a machzir gushasai also are not going to be pegumim, because the kal v'chaymer wouldn't apply to them. The Gemara goes a little weiter, but we'll hold it here. Yeah.
We got some stories.
Good stuff.
Yeah. So it's not a Yevamos, so doesn't mean it's not hard.
Gene, how soon do you have to do this?
No, just be in touch with her because